Right, the special counsel says former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn should serve little to no time behind bars. Despite pleading guilty to lying to the FBI, Robert Mueller released this sentencing recommendation Tuesday evening. The special counsel said Flynn was a key cooperator and provided substantial assistance with several investigations, including the Russia probe. Flynn pled guilty last year to a single count of lying to the FBI about conversations he had with a Russian ambassador. Sean Sullivan is a congressional reporter for The Washington Post and joins us now. Sean, good to see you.
Good to be with you, DeMarco.
All right, so what kind of message does Flynn's sentencing recommendation send to other witnesses and the special counsel's probe?
Well, the main message that it sends is that the special counsel found his assistance in their investigation really helpful. That's the big takeaway here. Now, the big question mark is how, because when you look at this legal filing, much of it is redacted. So we don't exactly know how Flynn was helpful, what information he revealed, what other avenues he might have led investigators down, or what it means for President Trump. But the fact of the matter is, looking at the conclusions that they draw, the fact that they are willing to vouch for him in this way suggests that they got a lot of assistance and a lot of information about him in the questions that they're seeking in their investigations. And that raises all sorts of new questions about where this investigation will lead. But what's clear is that it wasn't a dead end for investigators to work with Flynn in their process.
All right, Sean, we expect Mueller's team to also file memos regarding former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and the president's former attorney Michael Cohen. How much do you think we can expect to learn from those?
Well, that's another big day that's coming up in this investigation on Friday. And when we look at those filings, we'll have similar questions. What did investigators learn from Cohen? Now, when you look at Manafort, of course, one question that I think a lot of people are going to have is, well, how did he mislead the special counsel, which is what some of it, at least what we're expecting to find out. Now, again, these documents could also be heavily retracted, limited in what they actually reveal publicly. So we may not know substantively a lot about what this means for the investigation, but there certainly are clues, as we saw with this filing when it comes to Flynn. And so we'll be watching eagerly to see, if we can find similar clues when it comes to Manafort and when it comes to Cohen as well.
The new White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, is reportedly set to begin working Monday. How will he impact the White House's strategy toward the Mueller investigation?
Well, that's a big question moving forward. Here's somebody who has experience, expertise, knowledge when it comes to investigations. It's going to be a change of pace for the president. It's going to be a change of pace for the overall team. And so we'll find out probably pretty soon how big a difference this makes in terms of the president's legal approach, in terms of the strategy, in terms of the public strategy. These are the questions that are going to come up in the coming days and weeks, and we'll probably find out some of the answers to these questions pretty quickly.
All right, I want to switch gears if we can. Congressional leaders were briefed Tuesday by the CIA on the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Afterwards, many Republicans came out at odds with the president's stance, vowing to hold the Saudi crown prince responsible. What momentum is there in Congress to take action?
Well, there is some momentum, given that you don't just have Democrats, but you also have Republicans, and including some allies of the president, like Senator Lindsey Graham, who are speaking out about this, who are concerned, who are convinced that the Crown Prince was complicit in this killing, knew about it in advance. And so there certainly is some momentum. The question is there enough to pass something, to agree to take some action? We've heard different ideas thrown out from different senators, some talking about ramping up sanctions, others talking about not having any sort of agreement when it comes to arms sales with Saudi Arabia. Senator Bob Corker, who is the head of the Foreign Relations Committee, has sort of raised the idea of a sort of broader, comprehensive response to Saudi Arabia. So we don't know yet whether any of these proposals are going to have the votes to succeed, but certainly the fact that Republicans and Democrats are speaking out against this is a sign that this is not just going to go away without some sort of fight from senators who want to see the United States take some action on this front.
And speaking of action, could congressional action pose problems for the White House, and if so, how?
Well, it could. I mean, if the White House does not agree to some of these solutions, some of these proposals that are potentially going to be offered by these lawmakers, then you could have a clash between Republicans on Capitol Hill. You could have a clash, at the end of this Congress, which is something I think Republicans want to avoid. You could have something like a veto threat potentially from the president if Congress is able to come forward with some sort of solution. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. This could get messy between now and the end of the year, not just between Republicans and Democrats, but again, between the president and his own party on Capitol Hill, which for the most part has backed him up the last 2 years.
All right, sticking with foreign policy, the president tweeted Tuesday that we are either going to have a real deal with China or no deal at all. This comes after an apparent trade truce resulted from talks with President Xi Jinping last weekend. Where do negotiations stand right now?
Well, right now it looks like we're seeing some mixed signals between what is coming out of officials on the Chinese side, officials on the American side. Investors seem to be sort of confused at this point. Initially, earlier in this week, it looked like the president and the Chinese government had reached a breakthrough that was going to be praised, celebrated by investors, particularly among those who worry that the president's tariffs are harmful to the economy. But in the last couple of days, we've seen more and more uncertainty. What will this deal actually entail? Is there actually a concrete deal in place that's actually going to happen? So there's certainly more doubt now than there was at the beginning of this week about where the talks are going and what this is ultimately going to produce.
All right, Sean, a final question for you. All this comes as Wednesday marked the Washington funeral of President George H.W. Bush. Your latest reporting is how Mr. Bush embodied the Republican Party's decades-long struggle with race. What do you mean by that?
Well, he had a complicated history when it came to race throughout his career, which spanned some very turbulent times in American history, the civil rights movement, the war on drugs in the 1980s, the crackdown on violent crime. And we saw him take different positions at different times. When he first ran for the Senate in 1964, he opposed the Civil Rights Act. But 4 years later, when he was a member of the House, he voted for a fair housing bill. Later on, as president, he signed a civil rights bill, but he vetoed one earlier in his presidency. So there were times where he did send mixed signals when it came to issues of civil rights and issues of race. And overall, the record was very complicated, and it did sort of mirror the Republican Party's complicated history and relationship with race throughout the last few decades.
All right, Sean Sullivan. Sean, thank you.
Thanks very much.